The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website.
Hello everyone and welcome to Live and Learn. I'm your host, Jerry Renaud. We have a very special guest here today. It is Lincoln's Mayor, Leirion Baird. She's going to be talking about all the good things that are happening in Lincoln. Don't go away.
Hello, I'm Julie Masters. Housing is a topic of interest to people as they age. Joining us today is Julie Kaminski, a gerontologist and the Chief Operating Officer for Immanuel. Stay tuned.
Hi everybody, welcome to Live and Learn. Today my guest is John Mabry and we are going to talk about the dynasty known as Nebraska Volleyball. Stay tuned. Hi everybody, welcome to Live and Learn. Today's program we're going to be talking about our newest residents to Lincoln. That would be Bison at Pioneers Park. Stay tuned.
This and more on today's Live and Learn.
Hello and welcome to Live and Learn. I am your host, Jerry Renaud. We have a very special guest with us today. It is Lincoln's Mayor, Leirion Baird. She is here to talk about all the fun and exciting things that are happening in Lincoln. Well, maybe not all exciting things that are happening, but thanks
mostly
for taking
exciting.
the time. Yes, mostly exciting. Thanks for taking the time to come down and talk to us. We always appreciate it.
It's truly a pleasure to be with you, Jerry.
Let's talk, first of all, about our recent storm. We had this terrible windstorm, and there are a couple of things that I took out of this, and you're going to mostly talk about one of them, but I want to tell you a little story too, and that was how the city reacted. I mean, it was just wonderful, and you're going to tell us about some of the things and where we are right now. But the other thing, and we were just talking about this a little bit earlier before you came down, I was at a friend's house when the storm came, and so we stayed there and we rolled through it. On our way home, we had to drive past the new Hillcrest area that's out there, and there were all kinds of trees down, and we thought, uh-oh, this doesn't look good. Got back to our house, which is out by Holmes Lake, drove in, there's this huge tree that's down across the road. You can't get in, you can't get out. Everybody on our block came out with these little clippers and these little saws, and we worked for an hour to clear one lane. And I thought, maybe it happens other places as well, but Lincoln is such a unique and special place. I love this town.
I do too. I think that's part of our special sauce. We are a city that, it's a big city, but we feel like a kind of a wonderful small town where neighbors help neighbors.
Yep.
I had a similar experience.
Oh.
I got home late that night after being at City Hall as the rapid response was mobilized, and I had tree damage. I got out a handsaw, it was all I had available. And sure enough, as it was getting dark, my neighbor came over from across the street with a headlamp and an electric saw, and together we cleared a bunch of limbs. So yes, people in Lincoln look after each other. It's one of the most special things about living in this capital city. And I'm really also proud of our city team that had such a rapid
such
response.
a great job. Tell us about some of the things that had to be going on there.
Yeah, well, first of all, we wanted to make sure that people had access to information and resources right away. So we were coordinating with Lincoln Electric System as they worked to restore power, not only to homes, but to our water well fields. We needed to get the power back online, and of course people stepped up and reduced their water usage during those few hours when we needed them to, so we're so grateful that people did that. And then folks, obviously in our emergency response included in this case, Parks and Recreation, and our arborists and our team worked just around the clock. They still are working around the clock.
They are still working, yeah.
To clear the debris, to clear those tree limbs, and to turn it into mulch. That's the next phase of the process. But Lincoln Transportation and Utilities helping to clear the streets and get the power back online to our well fields. Of course, fire and police able to assist people in need. But I think we're all so grateful that we didn't have any fatalities or serious injuries reported, and we're still continuing to work through the wake of that storm, which I think, as we all need to acknowledge and know, increasingly because of the effects of the accelerated rate of climate change, we're going to be seeing the severity of storms increase, and this was a perfect example of that. The high speeds of these winds, 80 to 90 miles per hour, flatline, it just wreaked a lot of havoc. And you see up in Omaha, they've got $30 million worth of damage. So it's something we all need to be paying attention to. And at the City of Lincoln, our teams are preparing and working to keep our city resilient in the face of these kinds of storms.
And you know, one of the things that we use, because our power was off for almost 3 days, but LES had this map that you could go to, and you could follow it almost in real time of how many people didn't have power and where the next thing was going to be.
Yeah, they worked around the clock too. We're so grateful to our partners at LES for their incredible work, incredible efforts, and yeah, neighbors pulled together to get through. You know, I'm sure there were people who hosted their friends who didn't have electricity, so we're glad that the lights are all now back on and power's restored, and we're going to keep working around the clock until the recovery effort is over.
Yeah, and we're hopeful that when this airs, because this will air in September, that all of that will be done. You still see some things piled up along the side of the streets. It's a massive job.
It really is. Yeah, we've had over 1,400 requests for assistance at this point in August, and we're working through those as fast as we can. An arborist can handle about 25 trees, you know, repair, recovery, assessment in a day, so it's a slog, but it's one they're very dedicated to.
We keep watching the mulch pile down at Holmes, right by our house. That thing just gets bigger and bigger all the time.
Yeah, yeah, we're all going to have nice gardens.
Oh yes,
that kind of mulch available.
Won't that be nice?
Yeah.
Okay, enough about the storm. Let's talk about some other things. One of them is associated with Aging Partners. I think this is such a cool thing that you recently celebrated the opening of the renovated Northeast Senior Center on Platt Avenue, and you have a new grant from the Nebraska Community Challenge grant. Tell us a little bit about that and how that all came about.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we work hard every day through our Aging Partners team and our City of Lincoln team to make life better for seniors in Lincoln. And one of my priority pillars for this term is to help Lincoln become an even more age-friendly community. And we got that designation from AARP along with this recent grant. The recent grant from AARP is helping us to create some digital literacy programming for our seniors.
Oh, what a great idea.
We want to help them use their phones or laptops and know how to navigate the online world so that they can be connected, get the services they need, stay safe online, and enjoy a higher quality of life. So we're thrilled to have those resources, and those classes will be hosted at different areas around the community.
And you know, that is such a good idea because the medical profession really is creating these portals where you gather your information and prescriptions and all of those things. And I know lots of people who go, I don't know how to get into the thing. So this will be a great benefit for that.
Yeah, it will be a wonderful resource. And then the kitchen we renovated at the Northeast Senior Center was another wonderful announcement. We've improved that kitchen because one of the pieces of our work that is so important is ensuring food security for our seniors. And we offer hot meals at our senior centers. This kitchen will help us deliver those high quality hot meals on a regular basis to the folks who come in for food and companionship.
Yeah, that is such a great thing because it is such a crucial a part of keeping seniors healthy and well and all of that good stuff.
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right. Fun time of year for you and the City Council as we sort of slog through the new budget, but there are a lot of agreement that's going on there and a lot of things. What can you tell us about where we stand on the budget and what are some of the really key things that you think are in there?
Yeah, well, I'm really proud of how this budget will continue to deliver on the fundamental city services that our residents want and need, and also help to cultivate our quality of life here in the capital city, because we want to be the quality of life capital of the country.
Good.
So, of course, that starts with public safety, and over 55% of this budget is for public safety services, equipment, vehicles, to help keep our community safe as we grow. And then we also invest in infrastructure that supports our vibrant economy and quality of life. We are investing nearly $50 million of streets in the first year of this budget. We are replacing old water mains that have been underground for a long time. We're going to increase the number we replace from 7 miles a year to 8 miles a year. And we are utilizing those federal funds from the Biden-Harris administration, the American Rescue Plan, administered through the state and given to Lincoln to create a second water source for our community. So we are working to order the pipes, to nail down the contract with the landowners so that we can create a second water source that supports the growth of our community. And then, of course, parks, pools, trails, and libraries, the things our community loves about our neighborhoods. We're continuing to build new parks, new trails, and make sure that our quality of life continues to sparkle.
Yeah, one of the and I'm sure you hear about this, there are construction projects and things going on, I mean, all over the city. I mean, the water one over around Sheridan Boulevard, and it's a lot of construction. You got to weave your way through those places. We've got 84th that's closed now, which is dumping traffic onto 70th Street and 56th and some others. I mean, how do you, I mean, people got to just learn that this is going to be so much better when it's all done, right?
Yeah. Well, short term,
Yes,
those orange
right.
cones can be frustrating,
Yeah.
and we know it, and that's why we try to get this work done as efficiently as possible. But they bring long-term benefits, and so as our residents can surely see throughout the community, we're improving miles and miles of streets. We're building new ones, and that's both making the roads safer for our traveling public in the long term, and supporting, you know, the movement of goods and commerce in our community, and the construction of new neighborhoods that need new streets. So it's really important work. It's a top priority of my administration and our community members. So we are so grateful for people's care and patience as they navigate the cones to keep our street crews safe. They're there to get this job done, and they're working really hard to do it as quickly as possible.
Talk about the safety and the fire. Is there talk of building some more stations, or are we pretty comfortable at where we are right now?
Our stations, many of which have been in existence for decades and don't really reflect the modern workforce, still need work. We've got foundation issues. We've got, you know, bunks and kind of group living situation, group sleeping quarters. We are working hard to modernize those facilities, but with the resources we have today, we can only do it sort of a bit at a time. So you see there's some real progress going on at Station 8. We're having to build a new station there.
Right.
We are going to be having conversations with our community about how we can invest more in making sure that the facilities for our first responders support their health, well-being, and the important work that they do. Not everyone's willing to sign up for a job where they pack up their things and say goodbye to their families and move into a fire station for a week at a time. But that's what our team at LFR does, and we need to try to make sure that their working conditions support their professionalism, their success, and their health and well-being.
And you're working to make sure they have them in the right places, because the one on 84th is closed down now, right? And that sort of moved to the one on to O Street. Is that how that moved?
Years ago, our community supported a public safety sales tax, quarter-cent sales tax, and that funding was used to build new stations. And yes, we've got a number of new stations that are relocated to help with response times, and that is definitely a major factor in how we think about revamping our stations, whether we're rebuilding them, reconstructing them, remodeling.
Before we run out of time, I am just always marveling at how Lincoln is growing. There is construction everywhere. There are new homes everywhere. You are building more condominiums and apartments downtown. It is just a city on the move. How are we going to handle all this?
Yeah, we're a city on the move, we're a city on the rise, and this is an important piece of our work. Our city team helps facilitate the growth of the community, and we are helping to really process more residential permits than ever before, and that's good because that's part of how you tackle the housing challenges that cities all across the country are facing. You got to build new, you got to increase the supply, and we're working through incentives and community partnerships to help bring down the costs because we need our housing to be as affordable as possible for our residents. And the good news there is that while we still have work to do, Lincoln has some of the most affordable housing costs in the country.
Yeah, are we still continuing to expand?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you'll see development at the edge and new projects in the core. And one of the things that you're seeing are there are cranes in our downtown skyline.
Oh, yes.
More and more people are interested in living in downtown, both as our seniors age and want the conveniences of being downtown next to services and opportunities to shop and eat and gather. And then also because young professionals want to be in the heart of the city.
Oh, yeah.
So lots of residential going up downtown at the same time as we build new houses at the edge of the city.
We're going to get some of it cleaned up before the football season starts. So people can
Everyone's excited about the football season, right?
I'll say they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, our teams will work to facilitate traffic and the safety of pedestrians as they head to Memorial Stadium this fall.
Fabulous. Mayor, thank you so much for coming down. We appreciate it, always.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you, Jerry.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in. I am your host, Jerry Renaud. Make sure you stay safe, stay healthy, and remember, it's never too late to live and learn.
I was doing some shopping and got a pop-up on my laptop. Computer had a virus. So I called the number on the page, and the guy on the phone wants to take control of my screen to sort it out. Then I remember a tip I got from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Control my screen. This is a tech support scam. Thankfully, my order still went through.
Recognize fraud sooner so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Masters, and are we in for a treat today? Joining us is Julie Kaminski, a gerontologist and the Chief Operating Officer for Immanuel. Julie, welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here this morning with you.
Well, it is a great pleasure to have you with us. So Julie, as someone who is committed to aging, you have a fantastic life story. For our viewers, could you tell us a little bit about your journey and your interest in working with older adults?
I always say that once you get working with the elderly into your system, it never leaves. So I started out in high school working in a nursing home as a dietary aide, and took it because my sister worked there and it was a part-time job that was flexible. Never in a million years thought I would go into this as a field, so I actually went a different direction. My undergrad was in international business and economics, so I worked overseas, lived in Japan, but there was this calling to think about getting a master's degree, and was fortunate to take a politics and aging class from Chuck Powell, who I think you know.
Wonderful man, wonderful.
Was thinking about going into politics. And he stopped and said, why not gerontology? And so that started my path, did my master's at Miami of Ohio in gerontology, and sparked my journey into this field, which has always been in the nonprofit aging services career. So,
what an amazing kind of shift in your thinking in terms of from international business to gerontology. So as a gerontologist, you've held various positions related to housing for aging persons. You've also been recognized for your tremendous leadership. I think our viewers will be able to see an image of you at the ICANN Awards ceremony. Julie, what drew you to living environments for older adults?
I am passionate about aging well. And that looks different for every individual. Some it might be in their homes, some it might be in congregate settings. And for me, I knew when I got my master's in gerontology, it was going to be on that housing spectrum. So my first job was with a company out of Des Moines, Iowa, Life Care Services, who happened to have a community in Omaha. And they had the full continuum of care. It was independent living, assisted living, and long-term care. And seeing how folks who may or may not have family support can live in a communal environment where we can wrap a variety of services around them was one way to see successful aging.
Oh, absolutely. So Julie, we hear the term senior housing and we hear it frequently used, but sometimes we're just not sure what that means. What does that entail? And so could you walk us through the various housing options that are available for people? And while you're doing that, our viewers will have the opportunity to see some images of some housing options that are available in the Omaha area. Thank you.
So you start with independent living, which is where an individual can come in, live on their own, but can bring services into their home. It could be meal delivery, it could be housekeeping, it could be med management, it could be a bath. Whatever services they may need, but they're living in an independent environment. Then you go to assisted living, which in the state of Nebraska is a social model. And again, the resident drives their care in this model, in this intermediate level of care, where a variety of services are already provided. So in independent living, that resident has to contract out those, where in assisted living, it's a part of that living setting that they can bring those services in. And then we have long-term care, which is a higher level of care. We call it a skilled need, and a variety of medical and non-medical services are around them. And then you have people's homes. That is another living situation where they could live in an apartment, they could live in their own home, and again, may or may not access home health, home care. And last but not least is a concept called PACE, which is the Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly. And the individual lives in their home, but their nursing home level of care, and you can rotate services around them. I liken it to a nursing home without walls.
Wow. What a great opportunity and a solution for people, again, who could very easily move into a nursing home environment. So Julie, thinking about, in terms of the housing industry, what are some of the, I don't know if I'm going to say challenges, but maybe opportunities that the industry is facing at this time?
I would say number one is staffing, especially the higher the medical area, the more challenging it is to get staffing would be one. Affordable, safe housing is another challenge. We recently opened up 56 apartments that are independent low-income housing, and we had them filled within 4 weeks. People moved in. So I think, again, looking at affordable housing in the state of Nebraska, especially for seniors, can be a challenge. And it's important in my mind that people, no matter what your income level is, that you have that access to housing, because that is one of those basic needs that people need to have.
So given those opportunities, if you could wave a magic wand in terms of thinking about future housing, what would you want to see built?
I would love to see affordable housing and maybe ADUs. And if you're not familiar with that, it's the additional dwelling or ancillary dwelling units, additional dwelling units. But they're small little pods that allow people that autonomy, but yet the ability to access services. So if you have a campus that has that affordable housing, but maybe it has access to meals or to transportation or to medical services, that as that individual needs them, they can tap them on demand, as opposed to maybe being all-inclusive.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, Lincoln is now part of the Age-Friendly Initiative, and Aging Partners is the champion of this. How does this thinking apply to your own vision of housing for the future?
And I applaud the City of Lincoln for embarking on this age-friendly. What I think is sometimes seniors can be an afterthought, and to put them at the forefront and actively think about how communities should be designed is that future thinking. So how do we make sure they're not an afterthought, but they're at the center of designing communities, and not just the communities, but access to the services that that elder may need to age successfully.
It really is a win-win, isn't it? The way you've described it, when you put the older person first, then everyone benefits. So as someone with a background in aging, Julie, how can students and prospective employees prepare for a career in the housing field?
There's so many different ways that you could enter it. So first off, what are you interested in? What are you good at? And what's your passion? For somebody, it might be they love life enrichment or activities. That's one avenue to get in. For somebody, it might be wellness. They love healthy aging, so they could come in and do some of the wellness activities. For another person, it might be transportation. They love the logistics of figuring out how to transport. If you're out there, I'd love to talk to you. But
I think we all would, actually.
But transportation is one of our biggest barriers. Somebody else, it might be the global managing, running a housing community. So that could be another one. But find out what you're passionate about, what you're good at, start down that path. Maybe it's volunteering, maybe it's reaching out to a housing senior living community and asking to shadow. Any of those are good ways to just start figuring out how to get into senior living, because we need good people who are passionate about putting residents first, and then everything else falls into place when the residents are at the center.
I know you and others have been part of panel discussions, and so our viewers will have a chance to see that image as well. But it's this idea of hearing from experts maybe can kind of light a fire in terms of people thinking about, what can I do with my life? Yeah.
And I always say, don't underestimate the power of one person. And that person might be in your life for 5 seconds or 5 years. I think back to Chuck Powell, who I mentioned, who my interaction was one semester, one class, but changed the trajectory of my life. I was going down a totally different path, and it was him kind of encouraging me to go down a different path. So never underestimate the power of one person and their impact it could have on changing their path.
What a lovely thing to say about Dr. Powell. Mm-hmm. So Julie, as we close this interview, frankly, we could talk all day because you're just such a wealth of knowledge, and I'm very grateful to you. So a question that I ask all our guests is, what brings you hope?
I would say my faith, family, and nature. I am blessed coming from a big Italian family, and so we are all in it, and my parents recently celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary, and the entire family was able to gather around them in church. And so for me, that faith and family are intertwined. And then travel and nature. I am grounded and given hope when we get outside. And the beauty that is in the state of Nebraska and beyond is something that gives me hope in the next generation as well as the current one.
Well, Julie, I think you've given all of our viewers hope about the different opportunities that are available in terms of housing, in terms of our space, but also in terms of knowing that there are leaders like yourself who are truly making a difference in the world. So thank you so much for being with us. And to our viewers, remember, it's never too late to live and learn.
My kid has been asking for this hot new gaming thing, and I was like, okay, he had a birthday coming up anyway. So I finally find the video game online, in stock. Thing is, it was from this shoddy website full of typos. That's when I remembered a tip I got from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Bogus website, this is a shopping scam. Got us matching t-shirts instead.
Recognize fraud sooner,
He loves his.
so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Hi everybody, welcome to Live and Learn. My name is Kim Hachiya. As usual, I want to thank our friends and partners at Aging Partners and LNK-TV for producing the show. They do such a great job for us. It's really a privilege to work with these people. It's not an understatement to say that University of Nebraska women's volleyball is a dynasty. They have 5 national championships, dozens of star athletes at both the collegiate and international level, and a world record attendance, which they set last year. And tickets to the matches are prized and hard to come by. So my guest today has written a history of this storied and legendary program, and he is John Mabry, and I welcome him today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kim.
Yeah, thanks, John. So there are so many ways for us to talk about this book, but let's start about why you were interested in looking at the history of Nebraska volleyball.
Yeah, it really kind of came to me. I was at a match with my wife a few years ago, and we were just noticing, it was a Wednesday night. It was a cold Wednesday night, and they were playing Northwestern. It wasn't a huge rival, but still, you wouldn't have known that it could have been an NCAA tournament match. It was packed, standing room only, not a seat to be had, and I was just thinking at that moment, I was talking to my wife, I said, well, I don't know if anybody's ever really written about the history of how it got to this amazing point. There have been books written, coaches Pettit and Cook, they've written some great books, but maybe not so much about the overall history of how it started, and I didn't capture it all. I started around a little before Title IX, what was happening around 1970, and how things were starting, but there was volleyball here long before that.
Right, I love, which I do think is interesting, and we can go back and talk about that. I love that part of the book about the Ogallala and how they were just like this powerhouse in the, and I'm of the age, I was in high school pre-Title IX, and we didn't have sports. I mean, we didn't have competitive sports per se. Like there was swimming, and it was maybe inner city, but it wasn't a big deal. And so Title IX really started pushing things along, and so that's interesting. I also like the way that you did the book, which is focusing on the women themselves. And so rather than talking about the I don't know, the university angle of it,
Sure.
which there is some, but it's their story, and I like that. How did you decide to do that, and how did you do it?
Yeah, it's the whole process and the organization of it sort of evolved as I was writing, and then I would uncover a really great story about an individual, like, for example, Virginia Stair, who was from Waco, and her story of becoming an All-American and superstar, you know, and then on, I wouldn't have known any of this, of course, until I got to talking to her, that she was helping coach a team in Bighorn, Wyoming to a state title, and just fun stories about how the coach there somehow found out that she was in the community and said, you know, well, does she have any credentials to coach? And found out that it was an All-American from Nebraska. And so, and that team went on to win a state title. That story, Janet Cruz has a great story, obviously. Now Dr. Janet Sellen, who's part of the program now as a team doctor, which is really cool. And so, as I uncovered those stories, I wanted to I did want to highlight some of those women, but also their supporting casts. Kate Cernich, now Kate Ringens, was a huge part of the 1995 championship. She wasn't a star, but she became a star as they won the title, surrounded by incredible players like Allison Weston and Christy Johnson. And so part of the story is, you know, not just the All-Americans, but all these wonderful women who were part of the story in more supporting roles.
Right. The other thing that, I don't know, little known fact, or should be a better known fact, is that, you know, the academic success that every single person who's completed eligibility, as far as I know, I might have this wrong, but has earned their degree. And obviously some of them have gone on, you know, to earn post-bachelor's degrees, and a couple of them have been top 8 NCAA top 8s, which if you're in the sports world, that's a big deal. And you know, so that's a good story too, just that part of it, which is them supporting their lives outside of volleyball, which I think is, you know, it's important. I think it's cool.
Well, Dr. Sellen is a great example. Virginia was in that category. So many of the others too, like Karen Dahlgren, and are really great students as well, yes.
Right, or even people like, a colleague I've known for a long time is Vicki Highstreet.
Yes.
And you know, I guess she was on one of the first teams, but you know, she worked at the university in campus recreation and really did a lot to help, you know, the non-competitive side of women fitness and that kind of stuff. So you know, those are fun stories, and it was fun for me to read the book and like have little remembrances of certain activities that happened. Although it did make me feel extremely guilty because you know, I was in school at UNL when volleyball started, and I had no idea we had a team. They played in Maple Lee. They didn't even have, even if we'd wanted to go watch them, they apparently had no seats. And I do remember when we used to go to women's basketball games, but only because they played in front of the men. And so we would, if we wanted good men's tickets, men's seats, we would go and sit through the women's games. And you know, you'd start to pay attention and figure out what was going on, but it was a sort of a secondary reason for why we got interested in it. And sort of the rise of suddenly just sort of this, oh, they have a volleyball team in Nebraska, to like, they have a volleyball team at Nebraska is a pretty, you know. And so talk about how so many of these superstars that we have actually come from places like Waco and you know, Hooper, Nebraska, and these little towns that, talk about that.
The greatest of all is, you know, as you mentioned, Jordan Larson from Hooper, just in the Olympics, and a remarkable story right there. But yeah, the Ogallala story, Janet Cruz being from Blair and that area, and so you have all these great stories about athletes from smaller communities, and in some cases I tried to tell a little bit a story about the community and things that of course I didn't know anything about until I started to do some research for the book, and just how those communities are so proud of the individuals from their towns. Beatrice is a great part of the history. Enid Schoenweiss. You have the folks from way out west. You know, Scotts Bluff and Sydney. All sorts of great stories from the smaller communities, which makes it special. But then again, I was trying to be careful not to neglect all the wonderful stories from those who were not from Nebraska. I'm not from Nebraska. I didn't know a thing about this incredible story that is Nebraska volleyball until I went to my first match at the Coliseum in 1997. So, but Vicky High Street's a great example, and you know, Waverly, her connection, and Waverly and Beatrice, and Kelly Hunter, who's now an assistant and was a great player, and her mom being part of the program and growing up in Beatrice. Just a lot of great stories like that.
Yeah, you know, you are starting to see those second, pretty soon probably third generation players, which we've always celebrated that with Husker football, which of course has a much longer history, but now that we can celebrate that with women's programs too, that's pretty cool. That's
Yep.
pretty cool. So how did you find these women? How did you, what kind of Sherlock Holmes and stuff did you have to do to track people down?
Oh, lots of thanks there, Kim, from Vicky High Street, who you mentioned. Carrie and Tom Beckenhauer, great fans, helped me connect with Kathy Drews, who still lives in Lincoln, was one of the players who's featured on the cover. But yes, thank goodness for Facebook, which helped me find a lot of folks. Coaches Pettit and Cook and Sullivan. Coach Sullivan was the coach before Coach Pettit, helped me find folks, and so, I couldn't have done any of it without Lindsay Peterson, formerly Lindsay Wishmeyer, who's part of the staff now with the team and has probably been part of the staff as long as anyone, or at least part of the program as a player and as a coach and as a broadcaster, and there'll be a chapter about Lindsay in the second book, which I hope we finish soon.
I also appreciated the sort of the shout out to Nebraska Public Media
Yes.
and sort of their role in the whole deal.
Yep.
You know, because they broadcasted statewide, people were able to, you know, see the matches before ESPN and BTN were picking things up. And you and I chatted about this, how they, people watch volleyball on BTN and, you know, like Nebraska playing somebody in Illinois or something, and they're mad because they don't think the camera angles are right. Partly because we're so used to the excellent way that, and it's my understanding that when they developed the Devaney Center, that NET had some input into how to set it up so there would be good camera angles for things. And
all of that is true. Nebraska Public Media is a huge part of it, and how cool is it now that one of the stars of those telecasts is Kathy Wieskamp, who from Firth, Nebraska, and so. Yeah, it is a big part of the story, and there's connections to the Big Ten Network with folks like Sue Marriott, that was here and now is there. But there was thought into everything you're talking about, and Coach Pettit and Coaches Cook talked about how they wanted it to be lit in a certain way. The facility is sort of like a boxing match with the lights really focused on the court and the players, and you'll still see that at the Devaney Center. And there was a lot of you know, I wouldn't say major controversy, but it was a big deal to move from the Coliseum. Coach Cook needed some persuading. Tom Osborne had a major role in that as athletic director in the move, and again, some of that will be documented in the second book.
is the second book going to talk about Volleyball Day in Nebraska?
It will. That'll be a big deal. That was such an incredible event about a year ago, and so how that came to be and how it turned out to be this most perfect night. The weather cooperated. You know, it was really a special night.
Right. What, 92,008?
3.
And 3, okay.
92,000. You were so close,
I
Kim.
wish they could have gotten 2 more people so it could be like at 5. You know, I'm one of those people that like, you know, whatever. But yeah, pretty awesome.
92,003.
Wow. That's pretty awesome.
It is.
And plus, you know, then they have the drone show, which then they use later in football, and there's just a lot of cool stuff that came together to just make that phenomenal.
Yeah, and I have to say, while football is, you know, the big deal here and has been for so many years, volleyball has, you know, slowly, you know, rivaled the football program in terms of attention. But there's no, in my conversations with a lot of the Coach Pettit and a lot of folks, there's no, I wouldn't say bitterness or jealousy about the football program, because the football program helped get people to the volleyball matches at the Coliseum. You know, you show them your football ticket, you get in for free or for $1. Terry Pettit would put up flyers in the bathrooms in the men's rooms at the football stadium to get people to come. And John Cook is a huge football fan, and he always talks about how he'd love to be a football coach, and so there is really a good relationship and partnership with those two programs.
Well, I remember I don't have season tickets, but we had gotten a pair of tickets for the game, the volleyball game that was played after the Nebraska Northwestern game, and like whatever that year was that Ron Kellogg threw the Hail Mary, and it was just like the most amazing heart rate 72, heart rate 295. And it took forever to get out of the stadium, and we were trying to get to the Devaney, and they held the start of the game because they knew so many people were having trouble getting in and out, which also is sort of funny. Yep. But that that relationship, I suppose athletics, they know their audience, so they wanted to make sure that happened, and that was a fun night. Yeah,
and look at things that maybe, I don't know if they go unnoticed, but there is now a 1-hour pregame show on the radio before volleyball matches, 1 hour, and that is because John Baylor and Lauren Cook West, do such a great job, but that's because the advertising interest.
Oh, of course.
They were able to sell ads for an hour, and so why not make it an hour? But how incredible is that? That they're a 1-hour pregame show for volleyball on the radio.
Plus, if you can make some money, you're going to do it. John, we're out of time. Thank you. I could have talked about this I had some other questions I was going to ask, and we never even got to them. But thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
The book is Nebraska Volleyball. You can probably get it at all your fine bookstores or the Big River bookstore. And thank you very much. And maybe we'll have you come back sometime and talk about Volume 2.
I would like that. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, John. I want to remind our viewers that it's never too late to live and learn.
So, I'm playing with the dog, and I get this robocall from the Social Security Administration saying my card had been suspended and I had to call them back immediately. And that's when I remembered a tip from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Random robocall? This is a Social Security scam.
Recognize fraud sooner,
Robots.
so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Hi everybody, welcome to Live and Learn. My name's Kim Hachiya. We want to give big thanks to our friends at Aging Partners and LNK TV for producing the show. It's always a pleasure to work with such good professionals. One of the most prominent sculptures in Lincoln is the buffalo or bison that greets visitors at Pioneers Park if you come in the Coddington entrance. He's been there since 1930. He was dedicated even before the park was dedicated. And so he is prominent, but he's also sort of an emblem of some animals that live out at Pioneers Park. And since at least the mid-1960s, we're not exactly sure when, there have been bison at Pioneers Park. My guest today is Jamie Kelly, and she is the Nature Center coordinator out there, and we are going to talk about the bison, including the 6 newest members of the herd who joined in early 2024. So welcome, Jamie.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. I'm glad you were able to come. So let's answer this question first. Correct. Bison or buffalo?
Right. So it can be used interchangeably. Kind of depends on who you're talking to and where you're at. But the big herbivores that we have here in North America are bison. They're North American bison. Their scientific name is bison. And from what I've heard, the historic how they became called buffalo were when European settlers came over or explorers came over, they saw this large animal and they were more familiar with what the water buffalo are in Africa and India. And so they called it a buffalo. And so because that was historically what the term was called, but scientifically totally different species. We have American bison here, but people still call them buffalo, and that's okay too.
Okay, good, because I try to call them bison, but I'm not sure that that's really. So I referenced that the bison have been in the park for a while. So when, I guess you guys have pictures of, let's talk about why does the park even have animals, for one thing?
Sure. Well, historically, there were some exotic species out at Pioneers Park at one point. There was a zoo there. And then from my understanding is that when the children's zoo started taking off, it was determined that maybe at Pioneers Park there should be more native species and focus on the native animals of the Great Plains, and have the zoo have more exotic species representing animals worldwide. So at that time, it was decided that we would just keep some native species at the park so people could come out and have representation of animals that they would see in the wild. And so at one point we had other large herbivores, deer, elk. Today we just have the bison. We also have some raptors and then small animals too that you can see on exhibit. But the focus was decided to have bison.
Right. And so why bison? Why are they such a keystone species for the Great Plains, I guess?
Sure. Well, for us, the decision to focus on bison was that we don't have any wild bison anymore, especially in Nebraska. There aren't wild herds of bison, when once historically there were millions of bison roaming the Great Plains. So bison are so important to prairie habitat. It's important to educate people about the historic bison on the Great Plains, the impact that they have on prairies, and why the two prairies and bison go together so well. And then the history of the people on the plains as well, and the traditions and importance of bison to people of the plains. So we do a lot of education around the importance of bison and the impact that bison have on prairie habitat, and then also historic presence with indigenous populations.
So what is their role in prairie habitat? Why are they important? What do they do?
Right, so they're this large herbivore, which means they eat plants. Bison prefer grasses over forbs, which are flowering plants. So they're eating down grasses that are growing and allowing space then in the prairie for those flowering plants to grow and be successful. Those flowering plants then provide food for insects, pollinators, which then provide food for birds. So having bison eating down grass then help all other species, plant species and other invertebrates, mammals, birds, things like that too. So without bison, part of that whole cycle is missing. So having bison a part of prairie habitats is really important.
Right.
They also are great at dispersing seeds. So that big animal moving through the plains picks up seeds on their fur, and then those drop off in different places. Their hooves actually turn up the soil, so again helping that plant growth. So bison are really important to have healthy prairies, and in places where you can't have bison, cattle have kind of replaced that a little bit in certain ways. So
yeah, but cattle are less picky about what they eat, right?
Exactly.
Less picky and more picky in some ways.
Right. They don't do the job as well as a bison would. So again, we're having our bison out at the Nature Center for that education about the importance of bison in the Great Plains.
So early on I referenced that we have some new members of the herd, so let's talk about that. Where did they come from? Why did you decide to add to the herd?
Yeah, so we have 12 bison currently at the Nature Center, which is about the max that we can have with the acreage that they have, their pen space that they have to roam. There's additional acreage where people can hike and enjoy the prairie habitat and woodland habitat, but our bison are kept in smaller pens. So about 12 is the space that we have. As our other, like I mentioned, we had herbivores, deer and elk at one time. They got older and aged out and passed on, and so then it was decided to open up some of those spaces for bison. And then we were able to purchase some additional bison. This last year we added 6 2-year-old heifers into the mix. So we have all female bison, and the 6 young girls that came from the Crane Trust by Alda, Nebraska. And they were purchased through a donation from the Friends of Pioneers Park Nature Center, which allowed the city to purchase those 6 new bison to bring our herd up to 12. So I like to tell people that we have a herd of 2-year-olds up to 20-year-olds bison in our herd right now.
So then how do you guys manage them? We just showed some pictures of the bison coming out of the trailer. And so how do you guys manage them? I mean, do you have to feed them? Do what happens with this captive herd?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they do have their space where they can graze. They have lots of land that they can roam around and graze on. So in these summer months, they can graze on the plants that are growing there. Then, of course, in the winter, when it's less We have less plants growing. Of course, it's winter, things are dead or dying. So we do supplement their feed. We have some hay, and then it's also supplemented with some other products that we feed them in the winter months to keep them healthy. They have access to water in their pens. We do vet checks with them. We have park staff that check on them daily and make sure that their pens, have what they need in them. And so they are living a nice little life there at the nature center, enjoying grazing. And the other day when it was really hot out here this summer, they were in the water cooling off. So they're well taken care of.
Yeah, I think they're pretty interesting species. The day that I was out there, there were quite a few people, looking at them and everything, and they seemed fairly content. I know you said they wander, but they're clearly separated from people because, we've all seen those scary videos of people at Yellowstone interfacing a little bit too closely with bison for comfort. But.
Of course, yeah. Our girls are they're pretty calm. They're used to traffic in the park, but they also keep their distance. So they're able to. There's fencing up, and so they're able to. If they need some space, they're able to get their space as well.
So what kind of things do you do as far as education for people learning about bison? You talked about bison's role with indigenous people, so is that part of your education too?
Well, yeah, so at the Nature Center, when you come out to visit, if you visit the Prairie Building, we have an exhibit there with a skull of a bison and then some different bison artifacts that talk about how bison were used historically with the people of the plains. So of course, back hundreds of years ago when people lived here, you didn't have the Walmarts to go to buy your necessities. So you had to use what was here and what was available. And so the people that had lived here for thousands of years really learned the resources that were available on the plains. And one of the main resources were the bison, not only for food, but for other products as well. So of course you had the hides that could be used for shelter or clothing, bones that could be used for tools, even the bladder of a bison was used to carry water. And then making toys out of smaller bones. So really the whole bison was used historically by the people that lived here for thousands of years. So that historic importance of bison to the plains, not only like I had talked about for prairies, but also people, is part of the message that we want to share.
Right. I know that the herd at Crane Trust is, I think they have about 150, 160 out there. So every year they have to, you talked about your herd as being an exhibition herd, and I think they call theirs a conservation herd. And talk about what that difference is.
Sure. So our bison, like I had said, we have their pens or their pastures that they can graze in, but it's a limited area. And so we have bison just to have for education and have them on exhibit for people to learn. And our staff and our exhibits inside buildings and information that people can gather when they come out to visit will help educate them on the importance of bison. But at the Crane Trust, because they have bison roaming and grazing in more acreage, they are really using their bison as a conservation herd to really replicate what prairie habitat would have looked like hundreds of years ago. And so they have more of a conservation herd rather than our exhibit herd that we have at the Nature Center, because they truly are using their bison to replicate prairie from hundreds of years ago.
Right, and I know you said that bison were important in helping with the health of the grassland and everything, and since you guys can't burn as easily, which in my brain, bison and burning were the two things that really helped keep the prairies healthy. And so you have, these bison have to serve a dual purpose of, eating and educating, and that's pretty cool. So.
Yeah, we do try to do some patch burn grazing where we can, but like I said, our bison are limited to the acreage that they are in. So we do have cattle. If you've come out to the Nature Center in the summer months, you may see cattle out on our prairies as well. So like I said, cattle do replicate some of what bison have historically had the presence on prairie. So we have cattle out grazing. We do burning when we can, but of course when we're in a public park and surrounded, by golf course and homes and things like that, it can be a little bit more challenging than having large burns that maybe would have happened more historically. But burning, grazing, letting the prairie rest are all part of our land management that we do at the Nature Center.
So since all the bison that you have are female, there's not going to be a plan to have babies out there, right?
Right. No plan for babies, unfortunately. We'll keep our herd to just females for now. It just helps with better management so that we can make sure that we keep the amount of bison on the property for what the land can support.
Right. Yeah, you and I could talk about bison all day. I think they're just great. I love that we have, added to the herd, and that, that there was a commitment to do that. We talked earlier about the art out there, and it was very intentional that we have bison art. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And I hope people come out and visit our bison.
Yes, I would agree. Everybody go out to the park and meet the bison and say hello to the bison, and it's a good time to say it's never too late to live and learn about bison.